taking a while to load today. Hopefully the internet's going okay. This is taking a while to load. There we go. All right, I'm going to share this really quickly in the group. Once again, a shout out for my Facebook group. If you're not a member of that, look for Gently Led Sisters. It's a private group. I say private loosely because nothing on the internet's private. Okay, but we have 468 members, so getting closer to 500. If you want to join that. I don't have chapstick right now for my lips and it's driving me crazy. Random, but true. Okay, so we are live now. Let me have that live chat up there. And check it, make sure. All right. Okay, we are live. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, I bought this cute, adorable little Kindle not too long ago. My colors of Gently Led Sisters, see that? And I read it on here. Now, the thing that I do like about this is it's easy to take places. There's nothing's ever going to beat a good old-fashioned book, but I like this because it's very condensed. So it's very small, but it reads like a book. It's one of their newest Kindles that they have out. And it's just easy. It's like I order it and it's right there in my Kindle. So hi, Michelle. Okay, so I am going to do a book review today. This book was one that once I started reading it, I could not put it down. Now, I know a lot of people have been captivated by the story of the Frankies. I know I have, because how could a family with millions of subscribers on YouTube be hiding extremely abusive situations going on behind the scenes? That's obviously very fascinating to all of us. And just, reading this book, it kind of gives us a behind the scenes look at what life was like in the Frankie house. So I had my own thoughts already after watching the documentary. I did watch the documentary, but even more opinions, even more, let me see, I'm sorry, getting text right now. So yes, I had my own thoughts after watching the documentary, but even more opinions were cemented when I read Sherry Frankie's book, The House of My Mother. So here we have a behind the scenes look at the progression to extreme abuse that we all now know of. And we've read the police reports and read her journals and all of that. So we all know that it was kind of reading the book. I came to the conclusion that it did not always start out that way. I do believe Ruby Frankie is an extreme narcissist, first of all. And I know that term is thrown around loosely today. And Sherry Frankie even said something in there about how I know everyone wants to diagnose someone as a narcissist, but Ruby Frankie had all of the characteristics. And there is a difference between just trying to diagnose someone by taking a survey and, oh yeah, they're a narcissist, and actual diagnosed clinical narcissism, which is a disorder. And she firmly believes her mom had it. Same with Jodie. And then when those two teamed up, it was just bad. It was just very, very bad situation where they both were teamed up together. And you had the power control thing going. And, it was just not a good dynamic at all. I think it was a dynamic doomed from the start when they finally teamed up. So I wanted to go over some key elements and do a book review. And at the end, I want to also give some tips to raising functioning adults that don't need therapy after they leave your home. Okay. Because I think more so than just wanting to raise kids who don't need therapy, all of us want to raise, highly functioning adults, members of society, ones that are going to contribute to society, ones that continue on in this lifestyle of, for me, it's being IFB Christian, my husband just finished, and I've been doing community posts about it. He just finished last night his last sermon on functional families. And I do believe that was one of the most important ones. He did kind of direct it towards fathers. So it might be a good one for men to listen to, because men are the leaders of the home and they are to lead by example. And I do believe, just jumping ahead a little bit, that Kevin, Frankie, I have zero respect for the man. I do think he was very emasculated by Ruby's very strong personality. But instead of rising up to the challenge of being a leader by example and by his life and, leading in his home in the areas he needed to, especially when it came to the kids, he just caved in to whatever Ruby Frankie wanted. And I don't understand how a man can agree to no contact for an entire year with any of his children. To me, it almost feels like he just walked away. And I know he was going along with Ruby Frankie and Jodie Hildebrandt's suggestions, but I feel like he literally had zero testosterone. Like, where is your testosterone? You're a man. Act like a man. You don't need to go along with the whims of these two crazy women. So I actually have very, very little respect for him. I don't know how it ended up. I think, I'm not sure, correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think he got the kids back. I'm not sure, not totally sure. Um, but I mean, all of this abuse was going on, not really under his watch because he walked away, but they were his children. Why wasn't he keeping tabs on them? Why wasn't he staying up to date? How can you, as a father, agree to a year no contact with him? So I agree, Michelle. She said, I won't repeat what my husband has to say about him. We live in Utah. It was all over the news. Yeah, I have less than zero respect for the man. Obviously, I feel worse towards Jodie and Ruby because they were the ones inflicting the abuse. However, he was in the home all the years that Ruby was doing, her emotional abuse and just the horrible person that she was. The house was full of anger and full of over the top punishments, and he was right there for all that. So I, yeah, just a little rant. But anyways, so starting out at the beginning of the book, was it always this way? Was the abuse always what it was? You're going to find in a lot of abusive situations that things tend to escalate. And this is also what I have been told personally by women who have reached out to me. It would start out with something very small. And oftentimes that is the abuser's way of seeing what they can get away with, whether that's calling you a horrible name, whether that's slapping you, hitting you, pushing you to the ground. They're going to push their limits and they're going to see what they can get away with. If you let them get away with it, you don't do anything about it, you stay there, because in America, when you stay with a man who's abusing you, that's almost like you are condoning it, because you can leave, you can get help, you can call the authorities. And if you don't do that, it's almost like, and this is what the abusers want to make it like, you're consenting to it, or it's consensual. So, abusers will often start with small things and it will gradually work up to bigger things until you're getting pummeled and beaten, or in Ruby and Jodie's case, they're tying them to the beds and restraining them and, withholding food and making them stand out for hours with things on their head and, all sorts of things. So Sherry states that it wasn't always the way that it ended up, but life was always high tense and it was like walking on eggshells in the home. And she put in here, this is on page Chapter 3, Mommy Isn't Very Nice to Me is the name of the chapter. And page 17, she said, no child should ever have to earn a parent's affection, and no amount of achievement can ever fill the void where unconditional love should be. Today, the mere thought of sitting at a piano triggers some of my earliest and deepest anxieties, all tied to my mother. It's a shame how the most beautiful things, even music, can be ruined by the shadows of our past. And she tells the instance of how, from the time that she was young. Looking back, I marvel at how quickly my young mind adapted to Ruby's moods. At 5, I knew my place instinctively. Be pliable, be obedient, shape and mold myself into whatever form would earn Ruby's conditional affection. I was a plant straining toward the sun, contorting myself into unnatural shapes just to catch a ray of her approval. But no matter how much I twisted and turned, no matter how much I achieved or accomplished, it would never be enough. There would always be some new hoop to jump through, some new standard to meet. And she talks about just piano lessons and then how stressed out she would be because even when she would work really hard on a piece and then she would sit down to play it for her piano teacher, she was after that, sticker or that star to show that she had passed the song, and just how devastated she would be if her teacher thought that she should do it another week, where Ruby had deemed it acceptable. And so she would almost have like a mini panic attack at 4 or 5, 6 years old if she wouldn't pass the song. So it was just all of these things being put on her from the young age. She was also the oldest. And I am the oldest daughter. I'm the oldest child. I'm the oldest child and the oldest daughter. But oldest daughters, especially, and it doesn't even matter what ranking in birth order, they have certain characteristics and certain tendencies. We tend to be overachievers. We tend to be type A personalities. We tend to be people pleasers. From the time that we are little, it's kind of ingrained in us that we are the responsible one. We are the one our younger siblings look to. We tend to be the family managers. We tend to try to keep our little ducklings, our little siblings in line. We tend to be very protective. We tend to be very defensive of our family. And I can kind of see this throughout the book, especially when Sherry and her mother are estranged. Ruby cuts her off completely and pretty much just says she's dead to her. She cuts her off completely. There's still that desire for Sherry's younger siblings, and she worries constantly about them. She's obsessed with, are they okay? And of course, she never even knew the level of abuse it got to until afterwards when she was reading her mother's journals, and she didn't really delve into that too much at the end. I think most of us that just do a Google search, we can find those and we can read it and the horrific things that were going on. I think it was very difficult for her to face the facts of what her younger siblings were going through. And she never names the younger siblings. She primarily talks about her and Chad, the brother, below her. So yeah, I just, as the oldest sibling, there is a reason that in the Bible, the oldest had often double portion, because there is a lot of pressure put on older ones in the sibling, whether consciously or subconsciously, it's there. That pressure is there. So she talks about that. When she was 6, Ruby gave birth to baby number 4, another girl. And then she asked her mom, will you bring me silk pajamas when I have a baby? Absolutely, Ruby said, her voice light. When you have a baby, that's when we can be friends. In that instant, everything clicked into place. The distance I'd always felt, the longing for a closer relationship with my mother, it all made sense. Ruby and I couldn't be real friends until I was a woman with a husband and a family of my own, until I was her equal. Just as Ruby had to become a wife and a mother to truly earn her own mother's respect, I too would have to do the same. I would have to wait to be loved. Now, a little bit of background, they are LDS, Latter-day Saints. And she talks in here a little bit about how a lot of Latter-day Saints are into recording family history, recording what goes on in your family for everyone to see. And it's the LDS YouTube community is really, really big. There is there's an allure to them because it's full of family values. They often have big families, which is very fascinating to people that only have 1 or 2 kids. Big families are always fascinating, I guess, because if you don't have a big family, you always like seeing the logistics of how it works, right? How do you run a big family? How do you keep laundry? How do you cook? How do you do all this stuff? So it's very fascinating. Plus just the religious aspect of it. Mormons or Latter-day Saints, they tend to be very clean in how they live. Oftentimes they don't even drink. Is it Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses? I think it's Mormons. They don't drink coffee or any type of stimulant or anything you can be addicted to. A lot of wedding dresses that I've seen in Baptist weddings were ordered from Utah. They were ordered from Mormon companies because they are very modest. They make very modest they usually are pretty clean living. They are against fornication. They're against adultery. A lot of the same things that Baptists are against, they're also against. And so it's just this whole clean, pure, like family appeal, right? And so it's actually huge on YouTube. And she talks about, how her mom met her dad and how her mom pretty much went to college to find a man to marry. And she had certain goals that she wanted to accomplish, but it's a very big deal in LDS to have lots of kids. And her mom wanted to have lots of kids and raise them up to follow their way, kind of like Baptists do. So there are similarities between the two groups. Obviously, I think they're way off because they do believe in working your way to heaven. There's so many weird things with their religion that I don't agree with, but there are a lot of similarities as far as like kind of how we have big families. We want to raise our kids to follow, the way they were raised. So I can see the similarities between them. But her mom, that's the reason she got into YouTube, was because she kind of wanted to just chronicle their families, things that happened. She was always trying to get her kids to journal. She journaled, which was actually used as incriminating evidence against her, which was kind of funny. But so, yeah, Sherry said that there was current undertones of anger all the time. Her mom was always angry. She felt like she had to walk around on eggshells. It seemed like she couldn't please her. She wasn't happy. She was always upset about something. She felt like she never measured up. There was physical things going on, such as slaps, hits, pinches, etc. It wasn't just corporal punishment, where you give your kid a swat or two when they disobey you, or, because everyone that knows me knows that I believe in biblical discipline. I believe in corporal punishment for kids. But when you're slapping your kids, hitting your kids, pinching your kids, pulling your kid by their ear, just excessive force like that, that's leaving marks, leaving bruises, that is what I would consider abuse. So there was things like that there. Now, interestingly enough, when her and Jodie teamed up, it went more from the physical things going on to more mental and like doing mind games, and then to just destroying just the core of who Sherry was, really bringing her down, putting her down, demeaning her. Nothing she could do was ever right. And she was an overachiever in school. And, she was even told by Jodie once, I want you to fail a test just so you can be humbled. You're too arrogant. You're too proud. I mean, just constant, nothing was ever good enough. So now it went from that, and most of the physical, the slapping, all even the yelling, all of that kind of stopped when she teamed up with Jodie. So that was a shift. It was more into a shift of like mental things and emotional things than the physical at that point. So it's almost like it was more like controlled rage rather than just letting it out, right? Rather than yelling or rather than slapping or whatever. It was like more very controlled under the surface. But they tended to do like more sadistic things too, such as, and we'll get into it, making the younger kids skip Christmas while watching the older siblings unwrap the presents, and then making them clean up everything and saying, this is what you get for being unselfish, grateful little kids or whatever. And so it was almost like weirder, over the top punishments. But and then Ruby also had over the top punishments that kind of flew under the radar until Chad let it slip that he had been sleeping on a beanbag for 6 or 7 months or something, because his mom had taken away his bed because they deemed him rebellious. And in all actuality, one of the reasons he was deemed rebellious was because every moment of their life became filmed after they reached a certain amount of subscribers, and they were getting all of these paid sponsorships, right? And they went to Disney World, and they were all excited to go, but Chad was not. He was sick of being filmed. He wasn't having anything to do with it. So he was just kind of being a punk in the background of the videos. And he was ruining the aestheticness of the Disney videos for Ruby. So she made him, it was Universal Studios or Disney, I can't remember which one, a theme park. And so she made him go back to the hotel room as a way to punish him because he wasn't going along with her facade that she wanted. And instead of staying in the hotel room, he left and got a taxi and went back. And, the people knew, like, they were, the security or whatever knew Ruby Frankie was going to be there and they were helping her. Well, he went back and they let him in and he spent the whole day there instead of being in the hotel room, and Ruby just lost it. So she hit the roof. So, there was things leading up to it, but he ended up losing his bed for like 6 or 7 months. And he just let it slip out matter of factly on a video because to them, punishments like that were normal. Well, to the online world and YouTube community, it was not normal. Obviously, it's not normal for your kid not to have a bed. And it went crazy. And she said they lost about 90% of their sponsorships when all this stuff started coming out. And then people started digging into past videos and finding all these other kind of red flags. Things like, destroying loved toys, right? A loved item that someone had, cutting the head off. Weird things like that. She tells a story about how her brother, who is a jokester, came in, cut off part of her hair, and she knew her mother was going to be super upset because she had super long hair. And her mom was going to be mad that she got it cut. So she told her mom it was her brother that had done that. And she said she instantly felt guilty because she felt like she had thrown him under the bus. Well, her mom took him into the other room and like buzzed, like down the middle of his hair, buzzed this, I don't know, crazy looking, haircut, and said, that's what you get for doing that to your sister. So it was like a form of humiliation in a way, because I don't know if he ever shaved it or he had to just wear it like that for a while, but weird over the top stuff like that. So that's always a red flag when you see parents using over the top punishments, and especially in a way to bring great sadness. I know for my babies, Hannah has a bunny. It's one of those bunnies. It's It's like the thing I got for her at one Christmas where she's used absolutely the most, because she uses it every night when she goes to sleep and she can't go to sleep without it. And it's a bunny that has like lavender in it, lavender sachet, and you heat it up in the microwave and it's got like a warming pack and it's all warm and cozy. And she has to have that every night. I cannot imagine what it would do to Hannah if I took that and just for a punishment cut the head off and said, you don't get any more bunny. That's what happens. She loves that bunny. And as a mom, why would I do something sadistic like that? To me, it is sadistic to ruin something of your kids that they love. And, it's not biblical at all, because there's no biblical mandate for us to destroy our kids' items or possessions. So, punish like the Bible says and then move on. Don't do things like that to your kids. So anyways, so when Ruby's channel became popular, it became about the views rather than just enjoying and living life. So they had to have picture perfect smiles. They were bribed to make content. I know one time her mom asked her, this is a very famous incident. I have not actually even watched barely anything of Ruby Frankie. I never knew about it. My daughter Chloe knew about 8 Passengers, and she's the one that alerted me to, Mom, the 8 Passengers lady has been arrested and all this stuff's going on. And then I looked it up. But Chloe actually would watch her content, which I didn't know. Everyone thought it was just good family-friendly content, right? So there's one incident where Ruby was like, let me do your eyebrows let me film it. Let me do your eyebrows. And she's like, Mom, I don't really want my eyebrows. And she's like, I'll give you $100. And so she said, okay, because she found out that if she went along with her mom and she did some of this stuff, she would get repaid. She was basically bribed. So in doing one of her eyebrows, her mom accidentally took off half of one, and Sherry cried like on TV. And so now she was humiliated because she had half of an eyebrow, and also her humiliation was seen by millions of people. So, and she says she never thought she doesn't think she ever got the $100 either. And to this day, she doesn't know if it was a mistake or if it was something Ruby was doing to garnish more views. Oftentimes with the kids, it felt that way. It almost felt like they were trying to make new things to film, and they all just really got sick of it. They got sick of being filmed, day in, day out. There was embarrassing things where they would talk about, cycles and different things that would happen. And millions of people were watching this. So Ruby did want everything documented. She has a Mormon background, LDS. They love to have family history. Vlogs are meant for church members to share faith, values, and daily lives for the global audience. They want to spread their message and get it out there. LDS content is very popular because people like the family ideals and the image. And then when she had the video, baby climbs out of the crib, it went viral. And that's when all of a sudden subscribers started going through the roof. Then they got monetized. Then they got sponsorships. Every day, new things were coming for them to, you know, try out. So they would have cooking things to cook with. They got paid trips. They had so many items coming in the mail that oftentimes it would just be piled in the hallway and would just sit there for days, weeks unopened because they had so many sponsorships coming through. So, Sherry mentions in there several times, we never chose this. We never chose to be internet celebrities. We were minors. No one ever asked us if we wanted to be. And remember, they're getting thousands a month now because once you get past, oh man, she had millions of subscribers by the time she shut it down. So once you start getting up there, you're raking in a lot of money. So they had thousands coming in. The kids never saw any of it. And this was the kids' lives. The kids' lives were being documented like the Truman Show, right? If you've ever seen that movie, the kids' lives were being documented for everyone to see without them even really agreeing to it. So Ruby approached it, though, like a CEO. So the home changed, even the walls. She had loved the color yellow because it was so bright and cheerful. It was stark white now. She barely had anything on the walls. Everything was scripted. Comments from people did have a negative effect. Sherry often read the comments, and everyone is like, why is Sherry such a goody two-shoe? She's just being fake. And Sherry said it wasn't so much about being fake. She was in survival mode because if she did not do exactly what Ruby wanted, Ruby would come down very, very hard on her. She would take away everything, really. And Ruby had an image now to uphold. So any type of social media was not allowed because heaven forbid that Chad or Sherry would ever post something that would make Ruby look less than perfect, less than the perfect image that Sherry wanted out there. And so she continued giving all this advice. And so because of it, she often went over the top on, like I said, punishments and or just being excessive with the control, because she didn't want real life things getting out there, I guess, because she had that image. So all of that leads up to when Jodie comes into the picture. So Jodie first came in for a therapist for Chad is when they entered the picture. And Chad at this point, he had kind of learned the same thing that Sherry did. At first, he was kind of, a punk. He didn't want to do what his mom said or whatever. But he learned that it was best just to go along to get along. Because if you kept a low profile, you didn't get in trouble, you were allowed some things. So at first, when they were first married, before YouTube, money was tight. Kevin was the main provider. But then, so then Ruby started making money, though. So I'm trying to flip around here. But yeah, she talks about when her mom started filming herself for YouTube. She said we'd watch some of the videos together and then other YouTube influencers. And I wondered what it would look like if my mom started filming herself for YouTube too, like them. No, I thought she probably wouldn't want people to see how angry she is all the time. She didn't. So she said Ruby was always angry at us, constantly on edge, primed to blow, no matter how small the irritation. I probably could have handled her blustering if it weren't for the edge of cruelty that so often colored her rages. Yeah, so then she talks about being made to sing and being made to, she tells the hair cutting thing. She said birthdays were special. That's when Ruby would treat us with a ride home. She would make them walk to school all the time because she didn't want them to get coddled. They didn't have much time for TV, but they were allowed a few things. I'm kind of going through this real quick. So she has a lot of her journal in here that she wrote down. But then it talks about how she became a star. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Okay, so enter Jodie. So enter Jodie. And then she does talk a little bit about her dad. She talks about her father in chapter 34. And so, she said Jodie saw sex everywhere, in every interaction, every glance, every fleeting thought. In her mind, the world was a cesspool of lust and distortion, a roiling sea of desire, a 21st century Sodom and Gomorrah with only her twisted version of truth offering any salvation. A part of me pitied her, a repressed, self-loathing, deeply damaged woman trapped in an environment in which she felt compelled to conceal her true nature. Surrounded by women she couldn't have, women who were married to men she resented, she does believe that there was something weird happening between Ruby and Jodie. And she mentions that in the book. There was Ruby ended up moving into Jodie's room, and Kevin was alone in their bedroom. It was weird. In the twisted matriarchy Jodie had orchestrated, Kevin's innermost thoughts were a weapon to be wielded against him. With ruthless precision, Jodie would extract each secret shame, each hidden doubt, and turn it back upon him in service of her one true goal, to claim Ruby as her own, knowing full well that Kevin's shattered spirit no longer had the strength to fight back. And I do believe Sherry's not happy with how her dad handled it, but she doesn't come across as harsh. I think she sees Kevin more as a victim along with her. She sees him more as a victim. But to me, I'm thinking, you're the man of the house. You're the dad. You don't have to walk away from your kids. So I just do not think highly of Kevin at all. She twisted the happiness he felt, even in hugging his daughters, into something sinister and perverse. So Jodie just kind of sounds like she had some really deep, dark things going on in her mind. But yeah, so she came in as a therapist for Chad. She had a bad reputation online. She had estranged relationships with her ex and her kids. And these are all red flags that even you guys should be looking for when in listening to anyone's advice. These are some red flags. She seemed to have a problem with men in general. Her license had been suspended because people would come to her for help, for counseling or whatever, and she almost always would tell the man to leave off, like she does eventually with Kevin. She gets him to leave his family, and she would tell the men to leave, and then she would turn the wife against the husband, and then they would end up divorced. So she actually ended up losing her license because of a debacle with I believe someone in the military or something. She went against where you're not supposed to tell things or whatever, and she did, and he ended up losing his job, and it was a big debacle, and so she ended up losing her license over it. So Sherry talks about how Ruby and Jodie had an odd relationship. Ruby ends up letting her move in the house and taking over Sherry's room, which Sherry had just gone to college. And she let her move in to help with her demons. She said she was being oppressed by demons. And why isn't she? She's such a servant of God. And of course, they're going to oppress her. She's helping all these people. So she's going to be oppressed by demons. Because in a narcissist world, it's never the narcissist's fault when things happen. It's always they're being oppressed. Or, if you have a religious background, well, I'm just being tested, or the devil's fighting me, or demons are coming after me, or whatever. So it's never their fault that, it's not her fault her husband divorced her. It's not her fault that her kids wanted nothing to do with her, so they made Kevin, the husband, sleep alone in his room. She did end up moving back to her home eventually, but Ruby eventually followed her then with some of the younger kids. And it wasn't just physical stuff that started happening at this point when Jodie entered into their lives. It was mental and emotional as well. And one of the most poignant stories that she tells in here, and the most disturbing, is the Christmas story, when they decided that the younger kids were selfish, and selfish kids don't get gifts because, all these other kids do without, they were going to do without, but they gave the older kids gifts. So on Christmas, the younger kids had to sit and watch the older kids unwrap their gifts, which Sherry said she felt like puking the whole time. And she's like, oftentimes I'm like, why did I even do this? But it's because the manipulation was strong. The gaslighting was strong, and just the mental things that they were doing these kids. It was very, very hard to kind of see truth, as they like to call it so much, truth. It was hard to see truth when you're a kid or even a young adult stuck in this cycle of abuse and manipulation and gaslighting and all this stuff. So then Ruby wanted Sherry to start counseling sessions with Jodie, and everything within her screamed no because she did not like Jodie. But it started coming to the point where she did it to get along with her mom, make her mom happy. And she started believing the things that Jodie was telling her. And because she was an overachiever and wanted to please them, she started taking to heart all this advice that she was giving her and different things. And she became very, very critical of other people, very judgmental. She ended up losing almost all her friends because she was just mean and nasty. And it was all in the name of truth, all in the name of, I'm so much better than you because I'm living this type of lifestyle or whatever. And so she talks about how Jodie was encouraging her to cut off relationships, encouraging her to get rid of friends, encouraging isolation. And that is another red flag that you have to watch for when people are encouraging you to just cut off everyone, live in isolation, no community of support, no community, even with your family. You got to watch out for that. So Jodie loved isolation and control. She liked people doing what she told them to do. And if they didn't do it, she would make them pay, basically. And she encouraged people to cut people. She encouraged you to cut people out of your life over insignificant things. And then I have a page marker in here. Page 105 is what I put. Put it back here. Okay, so Jodie's playbook focused on isolation and control. To fully embrace her teachings, Connection students were urged to distance themselves from anyone not living by Jodie's truth. It was like watching a real-life invasion of the body snatchers, observing my parents' sanity circle the drain as they morphed into Jodie's devoted disciples. At first, I hesitated to use the word cult. It seemed extreme. But as I delved into some casual online research, nothing says normal teenager quite like Googling, is my family in a cult? Connections ticked all the boxes. Sure, we weren't being physically relocated to some remote compound, a la Jonestown, but we didn't need to be. Our dedicated enclave within Utah was the perfect setup for someone like Jodie, a ready-made, isolated community ripe for manipulation. Jodie's followers were compelled to confess their distortions in group sessions and through constant phone calls with each other. Her little army, informing on each other, recruiting anybody who would listen. The key to connection, paradoxically, was disconnection, isolating yourself from anyone who didn't speak Jodie's language, making yourself totally dependent on your new connections family, who would police your every thought until you existed in a hive mind of groupthink. At the heart of it all was Jodie, running the show with an iron fist. To those outside her inner circle, she was a respected pillar of the community, a beacon of hope for those seeking healing. Through sheer force of personality, she had positioned herself as the ultimate life coach, seemingly preying on LDS people who had started out simply wanting some coping tools, new ways to heal and look at the world. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a rigid script and tyrannical system designed to strip them of their autonomy while Jodie monetized their so-called healing. So Ruby's descent into Jodie's world hit warp speed when she took the 6-week life coach training course. Suddenly, she wasn't just drinking the Kool-Aid, she was brewing it. On Saturdays, I'd watch her hang on Jodie's every Zoom broadcasted word like she was the second coming. The stars in my mom's eyes were blinding. So yeah, she talks about how the members of these would like tattle on each other on perceived faults, how they would just gang up on each other. And it was very peer pressure oriented. And they also encouraged isolation. And then she had a weird view on men and sexuality. She thought like men just having even natural God-given desires was wrong and lustful and all this stuff. Sherry touches on how Jodie had been sexually abused when she was younger. And I really think this probably played into her skewed version of men and just her need to control, because oftentimes when you are sexually abused, this comes from not my experience, but hearing from others on this topic, you you are totally out of control when it happens to you, right? You have no control. So after it happens, sometimes you go too far to where you want to control every little thing. And I think with Jodie, that might have played into it, why she was so control obsessed and why she needed all the control and why she liked controlling others, because she finally felt like this aspect of my life I have some control over, where uncontrolled things had happened in her past. So, and then having a poor relationship with her parents opened Sherry up to other toxic relationships. Her dad was very, I'm not non-existent physically, because he was there physically until he left. Um, but he just backed up whatever Ruby wanted because she had such a bulldozer type personality. He just backed up whatever she wanted, and he just went along with whatever she wanted. So there was very, very rare that he went against her. In fact, she tells a story about how, and Jodie used this against Kevin. One time, Ruby had declared that she had to eat all of her food or something, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting food. So she was slipping it to the dog underneath the table. And rather than her going to bed hungry, Kevin slipped her a bowl of ice cream under the table so that she could have something in her stomach before she went to bed, like any good dad wants, right? And when he told that story in one of the counseling sessions to Jodie, she used it against him. See, you're facilitating rebellion. You're such a weakling. How could you go against your wife? You know, different things like this. So Sherry did end up in a relationship with an older man who took a lot of her innocence. LDS is, they're very much about purity and saving yourself for marriage and all this stuff. Well, he was close to 40 or 40. She's 18 years old and he was married, and he was a respected elder in the church. And he ended up taking liberties with her and doing things with her that he never should have. And she said she just kind of disassociated with it when it happened, but she needed a father figure in her life so badly. She went along with it. And I think it's because her father relationship was pretty much non-existent with Kevin at this point. So she knew it was wrong in her gut, but she felt powerless, basically. So then you get to the point, you go through all that, and then Sherry's mom disowns her because she actually, by that time, she had found a family that she was staying in their guest room, and she became very close to that family. In fact, at the end of the book, it talks about how she asks to call them mom and dad, and she pretty much calls Ruby Ruby all the time. She doesn't even call her mom or my mom or whatever. I mean, she calls her my mom, but she doesn't call her by her name. She just calls her Ruby. And so you can see the disconnect there. And then so she's in this family's home, and that family would help her, and when she needed to do things like pick up deeds, you know, different things like that. So, but when Sherry's mom disowned her, she wouldn't let her see her siblings. You know, everything was on Ruby's terms. Sherry used backup when confronting her mom when she would need to get the title for her car, or you know, different things like that, birth certificates, things like that. The lady whose house she was staying at would come along to help, and she would just kind of be like her silent support there, because Ruby was something. You know, even simple things like getting the title for her car turned into huge ordeals. So then the book goes into when the neighbor called Sherry to tell her that the police were at the house. And so Sherry hurried up and got there, but it was apparent no one was there. They used battering rams to get into the house. No one was there. And at this point, they were at Jodie's. And I believe this was after the 12-year-old got loose and went to the neighbor's house. So then, of course, everyone knows the story. They were arrested. And Sherry does go into how the court system or the foster or the CPS system failed them. And oftentimes this happens when there are actually abusive things going on. They're just mandated in such a way that there has to be clear-cut video evidence. And, you know, back when it happened, when the boy got out and went to the neighbor's house, he had physical signs of abuse. So because there had never been anything documented or videos, you know, but this can be hard for kids in abusive situations, because oftentimes Sherry would have her phone taken from her. So And it wasn't even so much when she lived there, the physical part, as just the mental and the emotional, which escalated into the physical part later. And oftentimes it does. You might have um, instances where they're very careful for the most part, but it's just one explosion here, one explosion here. So, a kid in an abusive situation isn't going to think to whip out a phone and video. First of all, his parents are going to see him, and that's going to bring down the hammer even more. But then secondly, oftentimes they don't have a phone or they don't have access to filming things. So she went into how there was multiple calls and inquiries about the kids, and they had multiple visits, but they never found any documented physical proof. And so nothing was ever done until the 12-year-old escaped. And then it was very clear that something bad was going on in the house. I watched the short video of the police when the little girl who they had buzzed her head, probably for another humiliation type thing. They had buzzed her head. She was sitting there and it was bad wrong. What had happened to those kids was unbelievable. She would not talk to him. She would not move. She'd been trained to sit there and not move. And so I can't even imagine at the end what the psychological stuff was going on. Um, so anyways, it was a super interesting book. There, I mean, overall, it was pretty clean. I have my issues with the whole Mormons and LDS. And the sad part about this is that in some weird, twisted way, Ruby, she thought she was doing what the Bible commanded. And in some weird, twisted way, she used religion to excuse abuse. She used religion to excuse not really having any love for her children. She says she loved them, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words, right? She said her kids were her whole life, but then she was doing horrible things to them. So, it's really sad because even Sherry, my heart goes out to her. I really hope someone has a chance to give her the true gospel because she's already conflicted because she's raised this way. And I think she's going more on the side of Jesus's love all the time, that the pendulum swinging far too far that way, where it's just sad because I would love for her to have the true gospel and let her know, it's not based off of our good works because Mormons, they do. It's all about being in the temple. And like she had her temple certification revoked for a short time. And I guess it's a really big deal because in order to, I don't really understand all the belief system, but in order to like be in the kingdom, you have to have the kingdom certification. And so if you get it revoked, it's a really bad thing because then that's like losing your ticket in or something. But she touches on how she did, but then because she had confessed this relationship with the older man, but the older man, because he was a respected elder or a respected leader in the church, didn't nothing happen to him. And she was thinking, I'm just thinking this isn't fair. It takes two to do this, right? It takes two to fornicate. It takes two to do this. And she's absolutely correct. But because so cover-ups happen. Cover-ups happen in LDS too. Cover-ups happen in Baptist, and it should never happen. But all that to be said, I hope she gets the gospel from someone and learns that it's all about believing on Jesus Christ. He paid for our sin. He is the way to heaven. No other way but by him. And, God is not happy when you offend children. God is not happy when you abuse children. God is not happy when the home life is like this. So all that being said, it's a very interesting book. My heart goes out to anyone in a false religion, and especially in a false religion where they were done wrong like this in the name of religion, in the name of truth, in the name of God. And we all know it's not really in the name of any of that, but my heart goes out to her, and I hope she hears the gospel someday and gets saved. But lastly, what are some tips and what are some things we can do to avoid having a home like this? Okay, anyone that's been watching Gently List Sisters for a long time, I talk about my home life, I talk about my kids, different things like that. But one thing I have never believed in or done is publicizing my kids, being an influencer in the true sense of just like recording our everyday life and then posting everything for everyone. I don't ever post videos of my older kids, especially where they don't want me to. I don't film every aspect of our life and publish it. I do think there probably needs to be some kind of law or guideline to what parents can do without having their kids' consent, because some kids might not mind having their life out there, but some might. I have some kids who would hate it. I have some kids who would love it. So, when they're younger, they don't really have a choice in that decision. So I do respect the parents. I know of this one influencer couple. They just seem like a really sweet couple. They have a bunch of kids, but just recently here they stopped publicizing anything with their boys because their boys are teenagers now, and they were getting to the point where they were uncomfortable with it. And they have a rather large channel, but they said, okay, we're respecting our kids' decision in this. We're not publicizing anything with them in it, right? So, um, our kids, though, in our home, they have to know that we love them. And I don't think Sherry thinks her mom loves her. And I don't think there will ever be any type of relationship, even after Ruby gets out of prison. She's pretty much written her off, and she's going to need a lot of therapy. She talks about all the therapy that she's going through, and it is helping. It is helping her just kind of overcome a lot of the intrusive thoughts that have been put there by Ruby and Jodie. But it's going to be a long road, and she's going to have a lot of baggage that she has to work through, even when it comes to relationships in her life, relationship with the future spouse, relationship with her future kids. It's going to be a lot to overcome. She can do it. She can overcome it. It would be easier, I believe, if she had Jesus in her life to help her overcome that. But, she doesn't. She's in a false religion. So, another thing is our husbands have to lead, and we need to let them. Kids need their dads. Sherry needed her dad. She needed her dad to be physically there, which he was, but he was mentally checked out a lot of times. She needed her dad to be her protector, and she needed her dad to protect her younger siblings. And honestly, he failed. He failed at protecting them. And I have zero respect for Kevin. Seemed very emasculated to me. Even in the documentary, he seemed emasculated, but now I feel like he was even more emasculated after reading her side of the story, Sherry's side of the story. He agreed to leaving and not having contact with his kids. He let Ruby just run the home and do whatever she wanted, and he just gave in to her whim. I mean, what man lets another woman move into their house and then lets his wife move in the bedroom with the other woman? That is so weird. So weird. My mind can't even comprehend that happening. So, you know, our husbands, they have to be the leaders of the home, and we have to let them. Don't emasculate your husband. Don't bulldoze your husband. Don't make all the decisions for your husband. Let your husband take the lead. Let your husband put his foot down when it comes to certain things. We're not doing that. There's been certain times my husband has said, we're going to do this or we're not going to do that. Okay. It is what it is. I'm going to respect that. And as moms, we hold a lot of power when it comes to this, because the home can be a war zone, or we can listen and respect our husband's desires and wishes and let him lead. And that's really where I think the perfect balance is. So, number 4, we must not expect perfection from our children. And she did. She expected perfection from her children. She had in her mind this ideal family, ideal relationship with her kids, which she didn't really even have relationships with her kids. It was all about control and having her ducks lined up and having this perfect image and all smiles, no fighting, everyone gets along, whatever. So obviously, I don't believe in filming every aspect of your life. I kind of respect the influencers that don't show their kids on camera. Crunchy Mom is one. I like her content, and she's chosen not to, because she's gotten so big. Her and her husband, that's like their business now, and she's kind of famous. She's chosen not to show her kids on camera, and I respect that, because she's going to let them have that choice. If they want to when they're older, they can. But right now, when they don't have that choice, she's chosen not to film them. Be careful following influencers and patterning your life after edited videos. Anyone can edit a video. I could put up this happy, sappy feeling video of my kids playing together, and It's roses and sunshine and happy music. And then 2 minutes before that, they were all screaming and fighting with each other. Anyone can edit a video. Follow the example of people you can see in real life. Ones you can see who have kids who love them and love God. It doesn't matter what they say on a video. It doesn't matter whatever video that they edit, that they're, this happy family. What matters is the fruit that you can see. So that's why I encourage everyone to get into a local church, with a good pastor who's raised good kids and, a pastor's wife who loves her husband and follows her husband. And they're leading by example. They're leading by example what a happy home looks like. They're leading by example what a happy marriage looks like. They're leading by example what raising good, happy kids looks like. Get under someone or follow someone's pattern, that's has the good fruit. That's just common sense. Don't do over the top punishments. Don't go over the top in any area of your life, but especially over the top punishments. You really want your kids in therapy for you, ripping apart their favorite toy or killing their favorite animal or, I don't know, whatever it is, burning their favorite blanket or their favorite book. Stuff like that is so sadistic to me. And it's all done to bring harm to their heart, to really hurt them where it hurts the most, right? Something that's going to hurt them right there in the heart. And just think about how you would feel if your husband got mad at you and took, I don't know, if you collect precious moments and smashed them all, or if you had a favorite book and he burned it. I mean, it's over the top. It's not right. It's not biblical at all. So don't do over the top punishments. You have to nurture your kids. You can't just yell at them, scream at them, insult them all day long, call them names, use profanity, throw things at them, pull their ears, whatever it is. You can't just do that and then raise children who are going to love you. You can't. You got to nurture them. It's not about rules in the home and making someone just feel ashamed and like dirt all the time. It's about the spirit behind what you're trying to teach your kids. Why are you teaching them about purity? Why are you teaching them about clean living? Why are you teaching them about keeping alcohol out of their lives and drugs out of their lives? Is it just to make you look good? Or is it because you truly believe that's the right way? Don't try teaching your kids something if you don't truly believe it. All the things I teach my children are things I truly believe in. All the things we live in our home are things we truly believe in. Be leery of people who try to have all the control, who try to get you to distance yourself from every loved one. Be leery of the ones who are afraid of outside influences, who try to get you not to watch someone, not to listen to someone, who are constantly cutting down other believers, other Christians, other, just other people who are trying to do good and live good lives. And they're just constantly cutting them down, finding fault with them, telling you they're horrible, don't listen to them. I can't think of a time when my husband has ever told a church member, you shouldn't listen to this person or you shouldn't listen to this person. You know what? He believes that they're smart enough to figure it out. Okay. And he also believes that, they know if it's going to be a bad influence on them or not. So he trusts that our church members are, smart and that they have wisdom and they have discernment. He doesn't need to control who they listen to, who they watch, I don't know what church they visit, whatever it is. Be leery of people who try to have all the control and who try to get you to distance yourself from every loved one, and be leery of those who are afraid of outside influences and are always cutting down other people in an attempt to make themselves look better or more knowledgeable or more smart or whatever. Smarter. You can't be hypocritical. Ruby and Jodie had a weird relationship. It was not ever affirmed if it went beyond just friendship, but it was weird. And Sherry alluded to that. But they taught against that. They taught against homosexual relationships, different things like that. Yet it was very, very, very weird what was going on in the home with those two. So yeah, you can't be hypocritical. Your kids are going to see it. Just have a happy home. It has to be happy. And she talks about how there were some happy times. There's always happy times in a childhood. But when everything is overshadowed by anger, by control, by weird punishments, by manipulation, by psychological things, by, just demeaning and cutting down and calling names. When it's overshadowed by that, it's hard to say overall that you had a happy childhood because that was there, So obviously there's going to be happy times in anyone's childhood. But when it's overshadowed by all the other stuff going on, that's going to be hard. So realize that your kids will choose differently in some areas, and that's okay. It's my kids aren't going to do everything exactly the way I do it. In fact, I hope with my kids, they're better parents than we were. I hope my girls are better moms than I was. I hope they take the things that they didn't like being raised by me and they're like, we're not going to do that. That's kind of what I've done my whole life. If something bad happened to me, I try to do opposite. Okay, this hurt me, so I'm not going to be this way with my kids. I didn't like this when I was growing up, so I'm going to do this with my kids. But you can do that and still honor your parents. My husband talked about that last night in his sermon. I can leave the bad while still, being grateful to my mom for the upbringing she did give me, for being grateful that she brought me to church. And then that's where I learned to be saved. And that's where I learned to be a good Christian. I can be thankful for that and still honor her while not wanting to do some of the bad that I didn't like when I was growing up. So, be more concerned about your kid's heart than what outside people think about you. I honestly couldn't care less at the end of the day what anyone out there in online world has to say about me, because there's been things said about me, believe me. What I care about and the things said to me have been by people who are trying to control and who are trying to get people away from listening to me, and they're trying to limit my influence. So I will throw that out there too. Plus I have to care about their opinion, and I don't. The ones I care about are the things my kids are going to say about me, the things that my husband says about me, the things that my friends say about me, the things that those in our church say about me. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the people in my circle. I don't care about YouTube land and out there and, online world and whatever. I don't care about that, but I do care about the ones that I'm close to. And Ruby was to a point where she cared about the opinion of all her millions of subscribers, and she cared about impressing them rather than impressing, first of all, God. She's not saved. So, but she says she was doing it for God, God or her children or her husband. She was just downright mean and nasty to her husband and downright mean and nasty to her kids. And she cared more about what YouTube land thought than her own family. So home is where you as a person are on full display. Home is where your strengths will be shown. Home is where your weaknesses will be shown. So what do your kids say about the person that you are at home? What does your husband say about the person that you are at home? That's what should matter. What does God say about the person that you are at home? That's what should matter. And then lastly, admit you don't have all the answers and admit that you can be wrong. I don't even think at the conclusion of the end of the book, I don't think that Ruby, and Sherry doesn't even think that Ruby ever fully accepted responsibility. In the statement that she read, she tried to make it like she was a victim of Jodie. And I do believe that they were trying to make it as if she was a victim, put all the blame on Jodie. But Ruby allowed that situation to happen, and Kevin allowed that situation to happen too. I'm actually surprised that Kevin got away scot-free. I don't know. I feel like as the father, there should be some type of responsibility put on him. I don't know why I keep coming back to this, but I think it's just every woman, I know for me, I don't have a problem with most men. I only have a problem with abusive men or men who abandon their families. I don't have a problem with most men because I appreciate manly qualities. I appreciate that men are leaders. I appreciate just manliness. I like it. And he was just so opposite of what a man should do when in regards to protecting his family. So I'm actually surprised that he's getting away scot-free. And I don't know if he got the kids back. Someone can leave a comment and tell me if he ended up getting the kids back. But I'm actually surprised that he just was able to walk away totally absolved from all responsibility of this going on. At least, can't you be charged with like abandonment or something? I don't know. But just the fact that he allowed his family to be put in this situation, it goes completely opposite of what men are supposed to do and how fathers are supposed to protect their children. So kids do need protected. And, sometimes it's good for our husbands to tell us to chill. My husband has told me that many times, Cassandra, chill. My kids can attest to that. And maybe I'm being dramatic. I'm a dramatic person. Maybe I'm being dramatic about something and he'll say chill, and that's totally fine with me because I like manliness. And he wants me to chill, he wants me to be happy, and so I'm going to chill and I'm going to be happy. But anyways, that was my whole consensus on the book. I thought it was a really good book. It was a little pricey. I think, I don't know, it was $15 or $16, but I enjoy reading books that make me think, and we can sit around and think all day about reasons that this happened. I do believe it was a progression. I do believe with abuse, it's usually a progression. It doesn't normally go from everything's great to you're being beaten to a bloody pulp. Normally um I think it starts out with, you know, they're yelling at you, calling you horrible names, and then they're slapping you, and then they're pushing you, and then, it goes further and further and further. And we kind of see that progression with the Frankies. It started out with yelling, and then a slapping, and, then it went into just kind of controlled rage, but it was more psychological. Then it went into sadistic stuff, slowly more and more sadistic, to where they're being restrained, they're being, tied to beds, they're getting their head cut off with some weird, not head cut off. Oh my word, that would be bad. It might have ended up that way. They're getting their hair cut off. There we go. They're getting their hair cut off in some humiliation thing. They're being deprived of food. They're being forced to stand outside for hours in the sun. And it just gets more and more sadistic. So watch for red flags. Watch for red flags when it comes to people that want all the control and want to limit your interactions with the outside world and family and friends, and want to isolate you and want to make you think that they're the package. Jodie did that. She was the package. She had all the answers to everything, even though she had no husband and she's giving marriage advice. She had no husband. Her relationship with her two kids was totally estranged, had nothing to do with them. Yet she's giving advice to all of these families with kids. Okay. So all of these relationships that were in no way her fault at all. Not her fault. Not her fault at all. And she's giving other people advice that completely, for a lot of them, changed the course of their entire lives. And I know for the Frankie family, it changed the course for their entire lives. It changed the course for their kids' lives. It changed the course for Kevin and Ruby's marriage. It changed the course for so many people. And it's just such destructive advice. So watch out for people who try to isolate you, who try to make you think that they're the end all to everything. They're the only ones that matter. They're the only, voice out there. And they don't want you listening to their voices. And they don't want you to listen to other advice. So big red flags there. I think it outlined really well the progression, and then just it kind of pointed out to me just some red flags to look out for, reading about how Ruby was and how Jodie was. And I just touched the surface. If you want to know, just read the whole book, but it was pretty interesting. But I will be praying for that family. I will pray that maybe someday they'll see the truth. Maybe some Baptist soul winner will knock on their door. I don't know. And will give her the truth of the gospel. The problem is that when you have false religions like this, you kind of tend to either one, the kids end up walking away from it all, or they just become very, very callous to anything that seems religious. And if you're a Baptist knocking on someone's door, telling them how to get to heaven, that seems religious. So unfortunately, when you have a bad experience like this in the religious world, which she did, I do believe she is still considered herself LDS, because she said she joined another church and she liked it a whole lot better. And the bishop was a lot better or something. But So I do think she's continuing on in the LDS faith, but oftentimes kids will just walk away from it all. And they'll say, it's all bad. When in reality, especially for the Baptist world, it's not all bad teaching. It's just that the person that was teaching it was a hypocrite, or they were abusive, or, they weren't living what they were teaching. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed that. I know it's part of like my OCD stuff, but once I get into a subject that I get really into, I can't stop thinking about it and delving into it. And I had watched the documentary and I really wanted to read her book. And I feel like I like books more than documentaries. I like reading something rather than watching something. So for me, a book is just, it sticks with me a lot more. And probably because I'm a visual, especially with reading. When I read words, it just sticks in my brain more. So I think I'm done delving down this rabbit hole of the Frankies. I think this is the last of it, but it was interesting to me. So because it's my podcast, I get to talk about what interests me. So sorry if it wasn't interesting to you, but it is super interesting to me. And the way the human mind works and the way control groups work, right? The way that certain groups are, because being a Baptists have the tendencies to be very controlling as well. And all religious groups have a tendency to become a cult. All of them do. And just kind of seeing the psyche of like a cult of personality. And that was what Jodie was. She was a cult of personality who had this charisma that like drew people in. And she seemed very authoritative and very like, I know what I'm talking about. But then when you look at the fruit in her own life, I'm thinking, why were these people going to her for counseling? She literally has 0 working relationships in her life. And yet she's giving all this relationship advice. It is mind-boggling. So I like looking into why humans do what they do and the human brain, how it works. And how do you get in this situation where you make your husband leave and you've moved into this house with this other woman and you're doing these horrible things to your kid. These kids that are so, it's so unnatural as a mom to do this type of thing to your kid, all in the name of good and truth. And it's quite fascinating. So, but I'm not alone because there's millions of other people that have been fascinated by it. So I hope you all have a good week, and I most likely will see you next Monday. So go home, love God, love your husband, and love your children. And I hope you all have a great week.